love living in Rhiwbina because all my friends are really close, within 5 minutes walk.
It's quite central because there's the bus and the train quite close, and it's only a short walk to Whitchurch. You can pretty much get anywhere.
In Rhiwbina we have maintained open spaces and trees. In 1967 I went into a lot of correspondence with a local MP who was Raymond Gower. At that time Rhiwbina ended at the Butcher's Arms in Rhiwbina. From then on it was all open fields, and there was a plan, I believe, to build over the whole lot. Anyway, eventually they did decide that 15 acres would be developed and 8.5 acres would be kept as an open space, and that is an open space to this day. The north side of the open space, that's south of Hill is I think is a stand of oak trees, which were the original oak trees of the ancient hedgerow that went along that way, and they are still there, and I think we should value them. And there's one particular oak tree right in the northeast corner, which I think is a majestic oak. Must be hundreds of years old.
It's gone so big now, Rhiwbina. When I remember it, there were no houses built all over Hill-Inchfach. That was all fields. Rhiwbina was so much smaller in those days.
Going back in history, Rhiwbina, or Rhiwbina as it was known previously, it was just a hamlet and farms scattered throughout the district.
It's just grown so much. I mean, most where I'm living now were fields. Well, a farm actually, this was the farm, dairy farm. And I remember walking through, well, from Porthamel Road where I lived, you could walk to the end of the road and just you were in fields until you got to, well, just all the way up the Wennel really.
As a child, Rhiwbina was a real village in those days, and we all knew each other. I mean, the children, we played together, we knew everybody more or less. We
used to walk up to the dairy, and I can remember the smell of the cows in the farmyard where the pub is now, because it was a big wall. As a child you couldn't see over it, but you could smell it.
The changes were enormous. I mean, when we moved in, Hill-Inchfach farm was still a thriving dairy farm, and where Hill-Inchfach is now, there were cows grazing in the fields there, and slowly the whole farm was eventually built over.
Where we lived before, which is not far from here, I used to say, oh, we live where the pig field was, because they used to go through the lane and up the stile, and there were pigs in the field, so it was very much more rural.
As children we played in the streets, there were hardly any traffic, we had street games, we played games in the yard, things like Bomberino and all sorts of games like that. On a Saturday especially, we used to vanish after breakfast in the mornings, and sometimes we wouldn't come back until tea time, and nobody used to worry where we were, and we were walking the Wennel and through the woods and all the playing games, climbing trees.
At the end of our road there was Hillsnook Park, and all the children from, well, the area used to go up there and play. There was a park keeper, and he was lovely, and he had a little hut, and he used to give us squash, and just children from all around the area used to play there. It was wonderful. We used to have hay fights and everything.
It just happened that one day in early 1957, at the entrance to Hill-Inchfach farm was a huge notice which said that a new development was about to take place which would be suitable for first-time buyers. And they were literally hammering the pegs in the ground, outlining where the houses would be. When I inquired about the price, they said it would be just over £2,000 for a three-bedroomed house. But then we had to make up our mind if we could afford to have a brick-built detached garage, which would cost £150 extra, and we went for it.
It was pretty difficult bringing up a family. I moved in, and I already had a little toddler, and I was expecting my second child, and there was absolutely nothing here. The roads were unmade and they were bumpety, and I had to take her down in my lovely big Silver Cross pram.
We looked at houses in Rhiwbina, we looked at houses in Corriton, and in the end we found this house in Pantmawr. I had never heard of Pantmawr. It was quite a nice little enclave up at the top of the hill. I like to call it Upper Rhiwbina. I have the feeling that quite a few Rhiwbina people don't really realise that Pantmawr exists.
Rhiwbina became Rhiwbina from the old name, Rhydweidlyd, when the railway was built from Nantgarw to Cardiff docks to transport the coal from the coal mines up in Nantgarw and places. And then in 1913, as the result of people like the Professor Jevons, who was a lecturer in the University of Cardiff, he had this idea that's already taken root in London, this idea of establishing villages for workers to give them a nice environment, pleasant surroundings, etc. And that's what happened in Cardiff. They looked around Cardiff to see if they could find a suitable place, and Rhiwbina was chosen in the end.
We are unique. There are other garden villages around. There's one in Caerphilly. There's another one over in Cogan in Barry. Nothing like ours. You could drive through it and not know that you've been there. But boy, oh boy, when you set foot in Rhiwbina Garden Village, you know you've arrived somewhere special. My
father was the secretary of the Welsh Town Planning and Trust Limited, and he administered the Rhiwbina Garden Village and elsewhere until his death. There was a committee for the garden village, and I think the chairman was Professor W.J. Griffith. And it was him. He came from a little village called Llanddeiniollen in the old Caernarfon in North Wales. And it was he who instigated the names of many of the streets. And of course he used the word lawn, which is the North Wales word for heol, meaning street. And that's why many of the streets here have a North Wales connection. And he's got Lawn y Dail, Lawn y Derry, Lawn Isa, Lawn Uchaf, all thanks to W.J. Griffith. Not many workers could afford the rents. So what you had was a middle class coming here to rent the houses, and academic people attached to the university. So you had people like Dr. Iorwerth Peat, W.J. Griffith, Professor W.J. Griffith, all sorts of academics, R.T. Jenkins, who became lecturer of history in, I think, Bangor University, etc. Many. We had the doyen of Welsh literature, Dr. Kate Roberts, came to live in Lawn Isa. And so there was Welsh speaking here.
People who lived in the garden village would go to the office, which at the time was up by the school, and if they needed a plumbing job, or they had the damp course had gone, or the chimney pot, they would go and report the problem to the office, and my father would be dispatched to attend to the problem. They had a yard which was down in the corner opposite the library, where they used to keep the material and wood and cement and slates and all the rest of it. We had an electrician, plasterer, carpenter. The carpenter made that corner cabinet there behind you, and a group of men who maintained the garden village houses. They were painted externally once every 7 years, and all the decorating was done inside free of charge. The committee decided that the cost of repairing them, like everything else, was escalating. I think the Garden Village Company had paid back the money that they borrowed initially to build the houses, and the time had come where, as I say, materials and costs had overrun them. Time had come to sell the houses on. And indeed, the houses were offered to the residents for sale. Very, very cheap. I think something like £300–400.
I went to Rhiwbina School from the age of 6. And again, I used to walk to school on my own. And there was a shop down the lane, Llanfach, called David's Sweet Shop. run by a Mr. and Mrs. David. And they had all these halfpenny and farthing, probably, sweets and things. Rhiwbina School was not quite as big as it is now. It was a smaller community school, really, certainly half the size of now.
And in the one playground you had the boys, and in the other playground you had the girls and the infants. And then there were railings also at the edge of the playground that was around what was the tea gardens. One glorious day we came to school and found that all the railings were being taken down for the war effort. We had to carry our gas mask in a little box round your neck, you know. I don't remember an air raid warning during the day. I remember air raids during the night, you know, because we were near the ROF factory. I realised afterwards, I didn't know at the time, but the ROF factory was the target, apparently, because we lived at the top end, the Monaco end of Tinner Park. I do remember the bomb that fell in Pampback Road, and a boy who was in our class, his grandparents were killed in that, and there were several houses bombed there.
Just as the war finished, there was a public meeting held in Rhiwbina to discuss a war memorial. And the opinion of most people who lived in Rhiwbina then, which was mainly just the village and a few other houses, Bureau Road and along there, were determined it was not going to be a block of granite with men's names on it, but that we should provide something that was more useful to be used by the public. So by general consent, they decided to build a public hall, and it was built by public subscription. To begin with, every house in Rhiwbina was canvassed to pay £1. We ran fetes in Rhiwbina, which were very popular. They were held every July, and we had a procession through the village, which started down Tinner Park Road. They came all through the village, and children dressed up, and firms would lend us a lorry with no thought of insurance or this or that, or safety and health and safety and all the rest of it. Yes, we held a number of fetes in the school field. That was the big money spinner. And people gave contributions for it, people who were interested, and it was built in 1957.
But I did enjoy going to the Memorial Hall once it opened. I was probably about 14 or 15, and they had a fortnightly, we used to call it the Jive, where rock and roll was played, and you know, oh my gosh, my parents used to actually come and meet me. They were so scared, I think, of all the teddy boys who used to go there. But yes, my friends and I used to love it there. We went to the Monaco virtually every Saturday morning, and if we were lucky and had 9pence, we could go upstairs in the posh seats. It was 6pence downstairs where the rabble were. And it was really good. I mean, I can still remember the atmosphere there. I mean, you know, you had competitions. I can remember them having a yo-yo competition and things like that where you could win things. And obviously you had the cowboy film, and I can't remember anything else about the types of film. Oh, cartoons and cowboy films. And it was really, you know, all the children went there. Every single one, you know, the Monaco was full. It was fabulous. And then, of course, as a teenager, I used to go there every other Saturday to see whatever was on. And then when I got even older, actually, with my husband, before we were married, we used to meet our friends upstairs in the Monaco every Monday night to see whatever film was on there. We had our own seats.
We used to rush just to look at the photographs on the outside, you know, in a glass case, just to look at them to see what the next film was going to be, you know. Very often you'd go in the middle of the B film, because there was always an A film and a B film, and the news. And when I was about 11, I think it was, the old lady who lived next door one asked my mother if she could take me to the cinema. And of course we went in the middle of the B film, the secondary film. And we saw to the end, saw the news, saw the A film and all the rest of it. And then Mrs. Jenkins, as she was, she said to me, I'm going home now then, come on, we'll go home. And I said, oh no, I want to see the rest, what I didn't see, you know, because you could do that, you see. It just went on and on. So I stayed there, and she went home. And the next thing, there was a handwritten notice up on the screen. Would Joan Reid please come to the foyer as her mother is waiting for her?
It was a pity when the Monaco closed, especially because that night they were really full. I saw all the queues going in. It was a really sad day.
We've lost a lot of shops, unfortunately, in Rhiwbina, like Gucci's, the ironmongers, and the grocers, the old-fashioned grocers shops, when they were cutting the ham and slicing the cheese and that sort of thing for you.
When we first came here, we had a whole row of shops. We had a butcher, a hairdresser, a little spa shop. We even had a post office, and we had a newsagent. And they thrived until Asda opened and the other supermarkets opened, and then one by one they closed down, and eventually the block of shops was demolished, and we ended up with a small row of little terraced houses.
When we first started, we got to know all the people, and it was interesting then, you see. Just think the supermarkets have taken over and can't do much about it, you know. Elderly people need a local shop because they can walk in and have a chat. And there are quite a lot of people, say, living alone, who probably quite enjoy that.
Well, I'll go from near the Monaco. There were 3 shops down on the right-hand side going towards town. There was a grocer's shop called Buttles initially, and then it changed to Wally's, and it's now been taken over by the whole shop. It's taken over by, I'm not sure what it's called now. Next door to that was Inman's, and that was a confectioner's and newsagents. Next door was Mr. McKelvey, the chemist, one of 3 chemists in Rhiwbina. And on the corner of Tinner Park Road, another of my friends' families moved in, and they had a greengrocer's shop, and all their family worked there. Another of my friends who used to work with my mum, her parents came and took over from Mr. and Mrs. Page in an off licence, and their name was Thomas. And then opposite that, on the other side of Tinner Park Road, was actually the doctor's surgery. And obviously there was the Monaco and the Monaco garage, where everyone went for their, well, either there or Smarts for their petrol, and for air in your tyres and water in your engine and oil. You didn't do anything in those days, you just let someone else do it. Then in the village, coming over the brow of the hill, there was a cobbler's shop, a very small shop, a cobbler. Next to that was, initially it was called Nethercott's. That then became Elwyn's, Mr. and Mrs. Thomas, and my mother worked for them for 7 years until I was, well, for about 2 years. And that was a confectioner's and newsagents. And next door to that was the library, which is now the aromatherapy centre. And Miss Jones, who was the librarian at one stage in there, she was got married to Jack Jones, the author. She was his second wife. So he was quite a famous figure in Rhiwbina, obviously. Across the road was Wilson's on the corner. It's a jewellery shop now, I believe. Which, again, another friend. You see, everybody knew everyone in those days, you know. A friend from junior school. The family owned that, and that was, I believe it was also where the bank was. It's now estate agents again. And then on the corner there, where the Principality was Thomas and Evans, which was a grocery store. Sort of supermarket, but before supermarkets became supermarkets. And next door to that was Mr. Bede, the chemist, number 2 chemist. I can't remember the exact order, but there was Lawrence's, which was the clothes shop, Commerce House, which was, they sold knitting, patterns, sewing things, all sorts of things, ribbons for your hair, all that sort of stuff. Rhiwbina, I think, have been there for a long time, the butchers.
And during the war, you had to register with a grocer and a butcher, you know, for your things. You couldn't go anywhere else. You had to register with them. And my mother registered with a co-op. And of course, she had a co-op divvy number. And whenever she sent you to shop there, she would always say, "Don't forget to say the divvy number." And I say, "No, Mum, 14357. I have still got it in my brain."
The co-op was big, obviously the big shop that you went to for all your food. And there was a meat area in there, butchers. And Peter Shields, who became the butcher who opened the shop in Beulah Road, was, when he was a young man, he was so trained there. And it was a fascinating shop because they had those pulley, put the money in the thing and it went somewhere and eventually came back on a sort of chain. It was very exciting going in there.
In Beulah Road, we had Gooch's on the corner where the dry cleaners are now. My mother was always in and out there as well because she had a unfortunate habit of leaving the kettle on the gas for too long and it would burn. She'd have to buy a new kettle. And Mr. Gooch knew when she was coming in the shop, he'd say, "Oh, Mrs. Reed, another kettle." I think we must have kept him going, buying all our kettles.
I can still smell Gooch's when I think of it, because my dad used to be going in there. They sold anything from a nail to a firework, dustbins, you name it.
They had Gooch's down on the corner and then Jones the chemist. And my mother liked going to Jones the chemist. She'd rather go there than the doctors, and she'd go in and say, "Oh, so-and-so's got a sore throat," or whatever it was, an earache or something. And he was another lovely man. He'd say, "I've got just the thing for you, Mrs. Reed," and he'd disappear into the back and he'd come out with a bottle of something or other. And because Mr. Jones said it would work, it worked.
So yes, the shops were very different, very different.
The types of businesses we got here now, solicitors, estate agents and other businesses which are not the ones that you're going to pop in every 5 minutes like you did when Gooch's were here.
Like in Rhiwbina, there's like, there are shops, but it's mainly just like Spa, which is just like a food shop.
So we're bereft in that sort of way. But when you look around, nothing else has changed. Absolutely nothing. We've still got a library. We've got the brook. We've got the train that chugs up and down. But most of all, and this is very important, we've got the people.
I've lived in Rhiwbina for well over 30 years. And when my daughter was 7, I got asked once would I go and help, just one evening in Brownies. And she's now 39 and I've been in guiding ever since. What we try to do really, not just in Rhiwbina, throughout girl guiding, is to give girls a wider experience. So it's about thinking about the community, thinking about the world, thinking about themselves, what sort of person they might be, and also thinking about others around them.
It's less about being solely religious, more as being kind of a better person. Now implement it into your own lives, basically.
I don't think many Rhiwbina people appreciate really how lucky we are, particularly of the Streamside Walk from All Saints Church right up to the top of Healy Cafe. It's lovely.
I love living in Rhiwbina. I think it's the most delightful area. Everybody's so happy. Everybody is so friendly. I still feel that we have a village atmosphere in Rhiwbina.
What we have liked about Rhiwbina is the community spirit.